Hello, welcome to the video. So I just want to go over the question, what really happened to the apostles when they died? How did they really die? It has to fit the biblical narrative. The general census is that, he died in Rome and he was a bishop, and due to rewrite history, they changed the name bishop to pope. He was a pope. Obviously in Matthew 16 he was a pope, even though Matthew 16 said nothing about pope, succession, or infallibility. Totally eisegesis the text. The cemetery for Peter was fabricated in the 4th century. Even the archaeologists, when asked, is this Peter's body, he even said it's uncertain. But yet somehow today everybody's certain that was Peter's body. So it just does not fit the biblical narrative of Peter being a bishop or a pope or an overseer in Rome. Now, an overseer is somebody who oversees a certain area, okay? Just confined to an area, bishop, okay? So it just does not fit the biblical narrative. The idea, Jesus never gave him that role to be an overseer or bishop or pope. There have been people attempted to try to make that work based on scripture, and I have a video on that. Talk about Yahoo hermeneutics. Like, wow, you're doing all kinds of gymnastics to get to that point. Clearly, Jesus never gave him that role, okay? So what role did did Jesus give Peter? So it starts in Matthew 10:23. Whenever they persecute in this city, flee to another. For to this city you will by no means finish the city of Israel until the Son of Man comes. So the sign of the Son of Man occurred in the sky on May 2nd of AD 66. So at that point, they would have stopped going through the cities of Israel. Okay. Also Matthew 19. Let's just add that here. And go to 27 to 30. Peter, having responded to him, behold, we left everything and followed you. When then will there be for us? And Jesus said to them, truly I say to you, the ones having followed me at the regeneration, when the Son of Man sits on the throne of glory, you will sit on the 12th throne, judging 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, that was on their last day. When Christ raised them up, that was on during their last Yom Teruah, September 22nd, 87-3, just a few years after the temple was destroyed. And everyone who left house and brother, or mother, or father, or children, or fields for the sake of my name will receive 100-fold and will inherit eternal life. So, in other words, they're leaving, they're not coming back. Okay? It's one direction only. And so 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, where talk meeting the Lord in the air, it helps us understand which direction to end up going. So the Greek word that's used there for meet has to do with escorting. So who escorted who? When you piece this together, when I piece this together anyway, it's Christ who's the groom escorting his bride, how the Israel came to Christ to heaven and for their judgment of 12 tribes of Israel. And then from there, they've been there ever since, reigning ever since. So they were not to come back. Okay. And so that's part of the biblical narrative. And Matthew 24, Peter about to judge 12 tribes of Israel. Again, he was never assigned to be a pope in Rome. This does not fit at all. It passed right here with the role that Jesus gave Peter, okay, and 12. Matthew 24, where Jesus said they will deliver you to tribulation and kill you. We know that happened with James, okay? James is martyred in the year 44. He was one of the 12 that was killed, okay? Matthew 28, Jesus said, all authority has been given to me in heaven and earth. Go therefore. You're talking to disciples. You're not talking to the church as a whole, okay? Gentiles were not even in view at this time, and not until like 3.5 years later. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, okay? These were Jews and all nations. Go to Acts chapter 2, verse 5. Let's go there for a second. Acts chapter 2, verse 5. Now there were Jews living in Jerusalem, devout men from every nation under heaven. Okay, there were Jews in all nations. Okay, and so as you go back to Matthew 10:23, the cities of Israel were Jews, cities of Jews in every nation. Okay, so that's what this is about. This is not about Gentiles. Okay, Paul, on the other hand, he had the gospel to Gentiles, the same gospel, but it had no time indicator attached to it, where this one had a time indicator attached to it concerning the house of Israel, even to the end of the age. Now, the Greek word that's used there is aeon, which means age. Unfortunately, some translation has world, the end of the world. That is causing a lot of confusion among people. That is one of the sources of confusion, just a bad translation. It's end of age. Remember, Jesus got done talking to them about the end of the age, okay? When would these things happen? What would be the sign you're coming into the end of the age? The Greek word is aeon, used again there, okay? So when the temple was destroyed, it marked the end of the age, okay? It's not the end of all things, okay? It's still, the lawless one was still alive when the temple was destroyed. You still had the enemies of Israel alive when the temple was destroyed here at the Masada, okay? So anyway, so the point is that there were Jews in every nation, okay? That's what was going on here. Most believers today, when they see disciples of all nations, they think, oh, Gentiles. And they could not have been thinking of Gentiles, because you go to Acts chapter 10, which 3.5 years after this conversation in Matthew 20 took place, Peter pointed out it was unlawful for the Jews to associate with Gentiles. And he's referring to several passages in the Old Testament. The reason being because Gentiles are not considered clean, but in Acts chapter 10, God convinced Peter that he made the Cornelius household clean, so therefore he's not going to break the law. And so that allowed him to, in his conscience, to go to Cornelius' household without violating the law. Okay? So, in John 21, Jesus told Peter to feed my sheep. Okay, it's actually feed. Here, there's a better translation. But it's feed, shepherd, and it goes back to feed again. So the feed here is physical. The first mention of feed sheep is physical. So Peter was a fisherman. He had a boat. He'd been feeding them all throughout the entire Roman Empire as he was going. There's a famine in Acts chapter 11, verse 28, where famine was about to take place during Claudius' reign. And so Peter had to feed them, okay? He was not sitting around in Rome, okay? I guarantee you. Not only that, but in the year 49, there was let's see here. Let's go to the timeline here. There's expulsion of Jews in Rome, okay? So they were pushed out of Rome during that time. So he could not have been in Rome during that time. And Claudius' reign began time around here. So during this time of the famine, so Peter would have been very busy feeding them. That's why we don't hear much about Peter in the Bible. He was very busy doing other stuff with the house of Israel. His focus was only on the house of Israel, not Gentiles. Okay, let's go over that real quick. Oops. So if we zoom in here, I know I'm going to get to answer the question eventually here. How did they die? How the apostles? But you need to understand the biblical narrative here. Okay, so Galatians 2:12, Peter withdrew from the Gentiles. Okay, this is according to Paul. Remember, Paul had a conversation with Peter for 15 days. This is sometime later around here, where Peter filled him in on everything that happened. So when did that happen? When did Peter withdraw from the Gentiles? We see, based on what Paul wrote, when he's getting resistance from the Jews, okay? When did he get resistance from the Jews? Right after Acts chapter 10. Acts 11, verses 1 to 2. We see the Jews took issue with him, okay? you went to uncircumcised men, ate them. So it already began right there, the resistance from going to the Gentiles, okay? So then in Acts 15, it talks about the Council of Jerusalem. And Peter mentioned earlier days. He's referring to 17 years prior, right here, Acts chapter 10, okay? What happened there? By his mouth, he preached the gospel to the Gentile household, the Cornelius household. Okay, and then now that he withdrew right after that. Okay, that's the biblical narrative. Okay, he did not go around to be a bishop or an overseer or a pope. Okay, that was a position Jesus never gave him. Okay, so he's a shepherd of the house of Israel. The house of Israel, what's in view here? Gentiles were not on the scene yet. It's not on their radar. As a matter of fact, earlier Jesus had told them, "Do not go in the way of the Gentiles." Okay. Okay. So then, continuing on. So following the timeline here. So we already know that Peter told them, Matthew 10:23, not go through all the cities of Israel. Okay. So that is this green line here. So going through the cities of Israel, Peter's shepherding them and feeding them, and during the famine and so forth. Okay, they were to go in pairs, Matthew 10, 1-3. There are 70 that also did the binding and loosing, okay, the house of Israel. The phrase binding and loosing only applied to the house of Israel, did not apply to Gentiles at all. Paul, who is the apostle of Gentiles, used the phrase grafted in, okay, Romans 11, for example, okay. You cannot bind and loosen something that's not already there. Okay, the house of Israel were already people of God. It's a matter of them entering into the new covenant, into the new kingdom. Okay, and so kingdom is inwardly, by the way. Luke chapter 17, 20-21. Okay, so the binding and loosing only applied to the house of Israel. Okay, it did not apply to Gentiles. And then the house of Israel became desolate just a few years after the temple was destroyed. So Jesus started the church with the house of Israel. Roman Catholics want to believe that, no, he started the Roman Catholic Church. And that is 100% eisegesis to the text, based on numerous presuppositions. All right. And again, Matthew 19, judge the 12 tribes of Israel. Matthew 28, he's with them to the end of the age. Okay. In Matthew 28, Jesus will be with you to the end of the age. So if you go over here, in 2 Peter 1, 12-15, Peter knows that he's going to be dying soon. So that's an indication that Jesus was with him to the end of the age. Okay, this is written around AD 66. How do I know that? Well, first off, let's go back to the timeline. So the sign, remember, Matthew 10:23, you will not make it through the city of Israel until the Son of Man comes. So the sign occurred right here, May 2nd of AD 66. July, okay. January, okay. So the sign occurred right here, okay. That's when they would have stopped going through the cities of Israel. Okay. Again, Jesus said you would not make it to the city of Israel. It doesn't matter because Paul's on the scene as well. You also had during Pentecost, Jews from all over the world coming to Pentecost. Okay. So Paul made it clear that every creature under heaven has heard the gospel. This is Colossians chapter 1, verse 23, Colossians chapter 1, verse 5 and 6. There's also a couple passages of Romans where the gospel has been preached throughout the whole world, okay, entire oikomene, by the time the sign occurred in the sky. So they would have stopped that point going to the city of Israel, and then Peter would have written his epistles after that, and same thing with John. With John, his 3 epistles, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John. Now, Book of Revelation was written around March of AD 66. Remember, Jesus said, I am coming quickly, okay? So within 2 months, the sign occurred in the sky, 2 months after John received that vision, okay? So So when Jesus said, I'm coming quickly, he meant it. Okay, it wasn't even 2 months. All right. And it gave them plenty of warning, plenty of time prior to that. Okay, they knew, you're told many times through oral traditions, you're sharing, the apostles been sharing with the Jews about what Christ said in the Olivet Discourse going to happen within their generation. Matter of fact, clear that Peter was even getting resistance, and he kind of assured him, no, it's going to happen, and it did happen. Part of the problem today is that most Christians today, believers, they do not understand the Jewish perspective of Christ's coming. If you go back to the Old Testament, it's where God creates a physical entity to come along to execute judgment upon a nation, okay? So in the case of the first century, it's the Roman army, okay? So the Roman-Jewish war from AD 66 to AD 73, so AD 66 right here, all the way to AD 73, and during that time, also the gathering of the house of Israel. So, and in AD 66 was the last year canon was being created by the Jewish people. Remember, God entrusted the Jew with his oracles, Romans chapter 3, verses 1 through 2. So that was the last year. And then after that, they were in no position to write, and then they became desolate after that. So there could have not been any writings after AD 66. Okay? So the writings by church fathers claiming, oh yeah, John was seen up until the time of Trajan, that was totally 100% fabricated. That would have made Jesus a false prophet, and it does not fit the biblical narrative at all. Now, if you remember Matthew 24, Jesus mentioned there will be prayer flight does not take place in winter, flee the mountains. Prayer flight not take place in winter and the Sabbath, so that prayer was answered. Took place on April 10th, Thursday afternoon, April 10th, 70. So it did not take place in winter on the Sabbath. Okay, they would not have been having a whole lot of kids that time. A lot of Roman Catholics assumed that household means infants. They would have, when they were told that, they would not have been making babies. Sorry, especially when they were in their last days. Okay. But anyway, they were told to flee the mountains, okay? So most likely what happened to the apostles, they would have returned, let's see here, let's get back to the timeline. So they would have returned to Jerusalem, and we see evidence of that in 1 Peter 1:1, where he says, to those who resided aliens, scattered, you have to look at this from the Jewish perspective, okay? Not writing to Gentiles, the apostles of Jews, not Gentiles. To those who resided aliens, scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, who are chosen, okay? So right there, he's writing to Jews who've been scattered. Now, at that time, the center of theocracy was Jerusalem, the temple, okay? And you have to look at this from the Jewish perspective. It was not Rome, okay? That was fabricated, that was modified, that was modification made in the 4th century. They tried to change the center of theocracy from Jerusalem above, Galatians chapter 4, verse 26, to Rome. That is based on a rewrite of history, okay? So this is a clue right here that he was either in or near Jerusalem at the time, okay? And that when he would have written this, now he's hinting to them, it's time to go for their gathering, okay? You are scattered, okay? What the opposite of scattered? Gathered, okay? If we go back to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, concerning the gathering together to him, okay, the lawless ones to be revealed, well, guess what? At the time Peter wrote this, the lawless one had been revealed. Otherwise, Peter would not have told them, you're scattered, okay? So where did that fit in the timeline? So the lawless one revealed, his name was Eleazar, okay? He was the man of lawlessness. He revealed on August 14th of AD 66. So Peter would have written 1 Peter immediately after that, okay? And then those 5 churches written to, they would have communicated, okay? These are 5 churches that Peter wrote to, okay? They would have communicated to the Church of Thessalonica. Remember, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. They would wait to hear from him or a letter. Okay, either a letter or hear from him. So Peter wrote to these 5 churches. They were communicated to Church Thessalonica, it's time to go. Now they had to do it very quietly and subtly because there were persecutions at the time. Okay, so they had to leave quietly by boat. So they would have gone to Mark, who's in Alexandria. Okay, remember 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 13. Greet Mark, he was in Alexandria. Okay, and then from there they would have gone to Babylon, which is right here. Now it's called Fortress Babylon here, but the fortress not built until around year 300. Okay, so prior to that, it would have been just called Babylon. Okay, there was no fort at that time, but that's why Peter used the word Babylon. Now I know you see Peter claims, oh yeah, he was using metaphor in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 13. He had been referring to Rome. That is 0% likely at the time he wrote that. Part of the reason being, it does not fit with the very first verse he gave in the passage, and if the gathering would have taken place in Rome, it would have been suicide. Nero was in power at that time, murdering Christians. Okay, and that would have meant that that the Jews here would have gone from here to greet Mark down here and in reverse course and go all the way over to Rome. Okay, that makes no sense. And then that would have meant this. Now that was the stick of Joseph. Okay, stick of Judah was here. How are they become one stick? It's the stick of Joseph heading way over here, and the stick of Judah over here. That would meant they had to travel by foot all the way over here, which makes absolutely no sense. They would have been risking their life to the Roman army, and they would have risked their life getting murdered by Nero right in Rome. It makes no sense. Absolutely 0% likely to happen. That would have made Jesus the false prophet. Ezekiel 37 would never been fulfilled when the two became one stick. Here's the more likely scenario. So they met in Mark in Alexandria, and then they would have continued by boat down to where Peter was in Babylon, just about 100 miles away. And then Peter would have escorted them to Petra, okay? And at that time, this split was not here. So, and then later on, about 3.5 years after being there, just before the stick of Judah met up with them, okay, become one stick. It said right in there, Revelation 12, it flooded and then the earth split, okay. Petra had the history of flooding, okay. So that's the evidence we have based on topography. Revelation 12 has been fulfilled. So now the question is, what would have most likely happen to the apostles? How would they died? Okay, so if we go back to the timeline, February of 67, let's see here, okay, right here. That's when Nero declared war on Jerusalem, okay? So he ordered Vespasian to destroy Jerusalem and the temple. Now we're in a wartime scenario. Unlike when Jesus was on trial and executed, he was given a proper burial. But when you're under wartime scenario, they would have taken the dead body and just thrown them into the ever-burning trash dump, which was referred to as Gehenna at that time. It's not there anymore, but it was a trash dump that was always burning. And so most likely what would happen, now remember, around this time, Peter was told by the Lord that he's going to die soon, okay? And then Nero gives the order. It had been after this where Peter and the 12, minus James, would have died, okay? They would not have been given proper burials. They had been thrown in the valley of Gehenna. No cemeteries, okay? None of that. So what I just shared with you fits the biblical narrative, all right? This idea of Peter just going out to Rome. That first of all, it's obviously if you create a cemetery in the 4th century, there's a problem with that alone. I mean, Peter wasn't even around then. Was Peter ever in Rome? There's a very real possibility. Definitely not in AD 49 though. But keep in mind, he was not a Roman citizen. He did not know the language of Rome. He would have been, spoken in tongues. Okay, been able to speak Greek in tongues. Okay. He's not an educated man, just like John. So Acts chapter 4, verse 13, they are not educated. It's not. Some people try to get around and say, "Oh, that's referring to them not being rabbis." No, they knew scripture. Okay, they knew scripture, so you cannot say they're uneducated from that standpoint. It can only have been the language barrier. So so anyway, it would have been around this time, 67, that Peter would have died. Again, remember Jesus told him to flee the mountains. So John, one of the most intimate Christ, most likely when he fished the vision of Revelation, you compare the time indicators, Revelation versus First John, where it said it's the last hour. Okay, you got time and near, should take place quickly, and then that's the book of Revelation. Okay, that's when you see this vision, and then you have First John saying last hour. So there's a more near to time. So then you have to figure out who was he writing to. He was writing to Jerusalem, okay? He was actually preparing them for their 1,335-day prophecy. So that's what John was preparing from this period right here, alrighty? In all likelihood, John would have been with them the entire time at the temple, okay? And then they would have fled. Now, he'd been pretty old at the time. He'd have been about 70 years old, okay? And keep in mind, the average age back then was about 35 to 40 years, so he was pretty ripe in his age. And then he'd been with them all the way to their end, okay? And he would have died with them if he lived that long, okay? Not natural death, okay? But in all likelihood, knowing that he's the most intimate with Christ, knowing that he was an apostle, in all likelihood, that's where he would have been. I know fabricated history, if you will, says he was in Ephesus with Mary, and does not fit with the role that Jesus gave him. Matthew 10:23. The fact that he was writing to them, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, no indication that he stayed in Ephesus. Okay, that is completely fabricated. It does not fit the biblical narrative at all. All right. So anyway, that's in all likelihood what would have happened. So if we go to the map here, so you had Gehenna. Let's see here. Let's go to Israel here, Jerusalem. So the valley is south of Jerusalem. It's not there anymore. Okay, so it's not like something you can find a map, but you just have to find a valley, and there's a very good chance that that would have been it. So it's somewhere south of Jerusalem. There's Gehenna. Like I said, it's not there anymore. So, and that's part of the reason why there's so much confusion today. We just don't know the history, So anyway, so that most likely would have happened to the apostles back then. And that explains why there's no cemetery, okay? In the cemetery of Peter, there, it just, like I say, even the archaeologists at the time, that I'm not certain of Peter, yet somehow today, so many people are saying, oh yeah, that's Peter. It's all based on presuppositions. It does not fit the biblical narrative at all. Alrighty. All right, thank you very much, and I hope you continue to enjoy your studies.